Got it. Wants to make sure I understand. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. I guess I wanted to start off by showing a couple of examples of some of the work that I have done before. And then basically we can get into it. I can kind of walk you through the two different ways. And when I say two different ways, it's basically two different ways to bind it. But there are actually even more than two. I'll go in. There's literally an infinitesimal amount of options that just sounded more, it's more easy to like reel people in by being like two separate ways, but there's actually like infinite numbers of ways to customize it. And because they're so small, I know they're going to be hard to show on this camera. So actually this is where I'm going to flip because it is definitely going to be easier to see this way.
They're so cute.
Thank you. Can you see? Okay, I'm trying to like pull it back so that I can see the screen a little. Perfect. Okay, so I have a vague idea of what's on screen. So I've got a few different binding methods here. This one is like saddle stitched, and then I made a little cover with a magazine, an old magazine photo to cover the stitching on the outside. So it is really, really subtle, and you can kind of pack a lot more pages into these. And this is also the bigger size in terms of micro. I would call this like a mini. And these are like the micro zines that I'm going to be making today.
Okay.
But either is fine. I'll show you how, like, where you would stop in folding if you would prefer this. I know for some people this is a lot more manageable size if you're making them by hand. Here's a fully illustrated color one that I did that is it was fun, but the writing is so small. Like it's very hard to see. It was really hard to photograph. It's really hard to make a video of. It's definitely better appreciated in person. So if you want something that translates better to media, probably this size is more reasonable. I also have this one here where I put some fresh dried flowers in the cover with some cellophane and some sequins in the back, a little shaker. So you can do lots of little customization with them. I've got an example here, which I'm not actually going to be showing today, but it's essentially the same method as sewing. And instead of sewing, you staple it. I find that these are less sturdy. So if you're just making a one-off little like gift for a friend that isn't going to be opened a million times over, then this will be perfect. But if it's something you want to be used, probably it's better to find a more sturdy binding method. So these are some examples. We'll get these out of the way and we'll get started on, just to be clear, I'm working with a 8.5 by 11 printer piece of paper. You can essentially work with any piece of paper, but I would recommend it being a pre-cut piece of paper that like folds evenly. It doesn't necessarily have to be this size. You could use A4 if you're in a country where that makes more sense for you. But if you're just using like paper without a fine edge, it might get kind of confusing. So if you want to add a cover like this, you make the insert first and the cover separate. You don't need to worry about the folding or anything with the covers. So this one sheet of paper can easily make 4 zines. It could also make 8 zines or even less. I mean, you have options on how you want to customize it. These are 2 templates that I made that I'm going to walk you through today. These are the 2 ways that I'm going to teach. And I only used 1/4 of a piece of paper to make both templates. So if I was making these, I suppose I could make that 8 in a page. I'm bad at math, but all right, I want to also check, is this angle okay? Can you like see everything I'm doing okay?
It cuts off like the left side of the paper.
The left side of the paper on this side. Let me see if I can possibly pull a little farther back and include more. I might get my legs or something.
Yeah, that's better.
There we go. Okay. So it doesn't really matter which way you want to start. This is what our page is going to end up looking like when we first make our cuts to our pages. This example is a don't cut, so don't think you're replicating this. We'll get to that in a second. I would start on the long ways, and basically we're just going to make that grid first to begin with. It doesn't actually particularly matter which fold you start with, but if you want to replicate exactly the way I'm doing it, that is fine. I will show you how to reorder the pages and everything. If you have a ruler or a bone binder that you can use to press the edges and make them extra firm, you can literally just use anything flat. If you don't, then I open it back up, and on that same fold line, fold the opposite direction. And if at any point I'm like moving too quick on the folding, I can really easily get lost with walk through directions like this, so please let me know. Again, we'll open it, and we've got 2 folds for squares. And at this point, we're going to fold from the outside in. So fold to the half point mark that we just folded before. Make sure you line up your edges. If folds aren't exactly even, you do have an opportunity to trim them a little bit, but if you decide to do the traditional kind of like single page folded zine model, it's more important to have a very symmetrically cut page. So keep that in mind, take your time folding. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you don't want to fuss with sewing and cutting a bunch of pages out and you want to do the folded method, then you'll want to make sure your folds are as crisp as possible. And then you'll do that to the other side as well. Fold that to the middle. Great. And we are almost done with this page. So then one more fold, basically what we just did, folded toward the middle, except on the long ways. So we'll take these squares and fold them toward the middle. Okay. I'm pressing my folds. Oops. With natural light too, so if it becomes too hard to see, because like it looks like it's getting a little overcast, let me know and I can pop a different light on. Yep, those are pretty crisp. So now we've got our essentially our template to cut our smaller pages from to work for on our minis. So at this point, if you have a paper cutter or a pair of scissors, or even a box cutter and a cutting mat, that will work. I'm gonna cut out, I'll line it so that you can see just these 4 rectangles right here. That line might be a little messed up. I don't really care. This is just a demo. But essentially the piece that's missing here. Kind of hard to hold that at an angle that the whole page is going to be on screen.
Does it matter like which corner it is?
Not at all. I just started with that one, so I'm doing it the same way. But basically, you're just making your page. So similarly with the folding, if you want to do the folded method, you want your cut lines to be as clean as possible. It helps you to draw it first. It's fine. If you're doing the sewing method, you have plenty of time to trim the edges, and it really doesn't actually matter, which is why I'm not being too fussy about it, because that's the method I prefer, but it does take longer. And you're left with this, which you can totally just set aside. And we're actually going to, again, take this and cut it in half so that you have a piece, disregard the writing, but you have a piece that looks like this. So cut it in half. I don't know, is that the short ways? I don't know, whichever fold this is in the middle, so that you have the two rectangles sort of sandwiched on top of each other. All right. So I think a lot of people are familiar already with this template of zine making. So I'm gonna do this second because of that. I think this is sort of less revolutionary. It's essentially just a tiny version of the like punk single page folded zine method. So we'll set this aside and we'll do that method second. And for this one, we will still do the folds, we just won't do the cut. So I've already got it folded down the middle. I'm going to take the outside and I'm going to fold both of the outsides toward this middle fold. Am I jumping ahead too much or are you following? Okay.
Could go a little slower maybe.
Sure.
But I'm at the same part that you are.
Problem. Oh yeah, I have I have pretty bad social anxiety and I haven't done any public speaking in a long time, and even conversationally I get told I move too fast. So
That's okay.
please, I will try to keep that in mind, but also I'm used to it. If you need to advocate for yourself, I will not be offended at all.
Okay.
Here is what my folds
fold-
look like right now.
So you've like fold
Both of them toward the middle.
Okay.
Like this, and then I've just unfolded it, but we can get to this stage so that we've got 4 little panels. Cool. Nice and even. And then once you've got these two folded in towards the middle, we'll unfold it like I just had it so that it's one page again. As a reminder, this sort of page is 1/8 of the page we started with. And then we're going to take this piece and fold it long ways and line up those folds you just made. It's a little messy. Now we'll fold it back open to our page size. And at this point, it's sort of what I'm going to do for a walkthrough is we're going to just walk through the whole page as if these are filled out. And if you want to fill out a blank zine, which I do all the time, I start with blanks like this one and fill them out retroactively, kind of like a self-made coloring book. It's not everybody's favorite method. If you want to do, if you want to have your zine all made before you assemble it, or theoretically, if you photocopied it and shrunk the image down and you wanted to make a digital zine this small, you can lay out your pages first. Like if I'm not very good at print layouts, so I don't know how you would get it this small and get it printed out, but I know it's possible. You could lay out your pages first, totally filled out, and then sew them. But the way that we're going to walk through it today is to just completely start to finish, bind and finish the whole thing and cover it, and then and blank, and then fill it in retroactively, just so that you know the method of binding it. So I have these as demos. This is basically what these are going to break into. And I thought it would make more sense to have it shown at both stages. I will show you how to cut this into this, but this is essentially what we are making. So we are going to cut on the main folds here. I'll go ahead and draw that again. All of my pens are dried up. I just moved to the desert and did not do a good enough job of closing caps for the altitude change, and a lot of stuff was dried up.
Oh no.
We will cut on these lines. Don't mind my sloppy lines. I'm actually going to work with the ones I've already cut. So we're going to cut on these lines once you've got all those folds done. And then you'll end up with a set of pages. And this is what I meant about with this method. It's less important to have your pages be perfectly even, because once you have sewn or stapled them shut, you can just trim the edges. Once it's all already assembled and you get a really clean edge. Whereas with the folded ones, sometimes the pages kind of protrude. I can see if I can find an example. Trying to find the little hedgehog one that I made. I made too many mini zines. They're all over the place. I apologize. Oh, here it is. This is a folded zine. It's fine. Like, I like it, but you can kind of see how the edge clips over the cover, and that's just the way that it's folded. If I were to trim this, then it would separate the pages and it would make the binding not really effective. So yeah, if you prefer a really clean finish where all you see is the front and back cover without it, then the sewing method is also going to be better. So we're going to sort of ignore that the pages look messy. We'll move forward with binding, and then you can trim at the end. So at this point, once you have all of your pages cut, which I know can take a second, it's fine if you're not caught up. We'll go ahead and grab a sewing needle. It doesn't particularly matter the size, but if you have one with a smaller eye, I would recommend working with the smallest needle that you can accessibly thread, because it'll make a smaller mark in the paper. But I have before worked with needles as big as like an embroidery needle. It does work. It just, again, it leaves a larger hole behind, and then it's a weakness in the paper that makes it more prone to tearing. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to try to thread this tiny one here. Your color of thread doesn't particularly matter. It won't show on the outside of the book, but like I tried to show, I bound with white on these, but it's harder to tell. But on the very middle fold, you will see some stitches, but from the outside, you will not be able to see the binding. So if it's important to you for it to match, you could choose a contrasting color with your cover, or if you wanted to match the pages, you could go with white, so that it's a little easier for people to see. I chose this off-white gray today, just so you can see what I'm doing. I might actually choose a black instead, because I think this camera, I'm using my cell phone camera, and it's not picking up detail in the best way. So I'm gonna go grab a black. So dark. I use, this is polyester thread. I really like this brand, Gutermann, for binding and for sewing, but I think for hand binding and for hand stitching, it's really, really sturdy. It doesn't tend to like catch or get kind of fuzzy, but it doesn't really matter. Whatever you have around will totally work. I'm not exactly sure how long I need. These are really small, and I never ever need as much thread as I cut. So whatever is easiest for you to work with. You only need a small amount of thread, but you need enough slack that you can tie some knots and stuff. So I'm probably like I would say this is about 14 inches that I have, and I have it folded over. So that's about 20 inches. Also, for convenience at this point, if you have an awl, AWL, like a hole punching tool with a fine point, it can be helpful. And you might see me use one because I have not the best dexterity. You can definitely, with these small zines, there are so few pages, especially if you're using a lighter weight paper, that you can definitely sew through it without punching a hole first. But I find that my pages will slip. And yeah, because of my disability, my hands shake and stuff. So it's easier for me to punch my holes first. I will do that because that's how I have to do it. But if you don't have an awl or you don't want to bother and you want to skip this step, then you literally can just entirely disregard this and just start sewing at the stage that I start sewing. So this is what an awl looks like if you are not familiar. It's like super, super sharp. So it makes the point without making a massive hole like a hole punch would. And earlier when I mentioned staple binding as an alternative, if you wanted to try that and you don't have a needle and thread, at this point, when you have your stack of individual pages, you can staple it shut. It's just, it's easier for pages to slip. And unless you add a cover that reinforces it again, it's just not as sturdy, but whatever method works for you depends on how fast you're working. I'm gonna take this. You should have a cutting mat. I don't. I do have one, but it's packed up, but I don't know where it is. So I'm gonna just risk it and possibly poke a hole in my desk. It's fine. Again, if you're punching holes with me, go ahead and follow these steps. If you're not, you can just disregard this. I always start in the center, line up my pages as well as I can, poke a hole in the center first, kind of do a little wiggle so that it goes all the way through. And then I do one about halfway to the top point and one about halfway to the bottom point. If you don't do this, then that is how you will be putting your needle and thread through. I mean, either way, that's how you'll be putting your needle and thread through. But if you skipped the awl, then this is where you would start. So I have instinctually tied a knot in my thread. You do not do that, actually. You followed my tying a knot, then cut it off. Sorry about that. I'm a seamstress before I'm a zinester, and it's a habit in my bones at this point. So you'll leave the tails out. You'll definitely want to start from the inside, and you'll poke a hole directly through the middle, making sure you go through all of the pages and, try to pinch them with your fingers or hold them in whatever way is easiest for you so that you can keep them all as lined up as possible. And then you'll pull it through and leave at least one tail in the middle. Then go up to the top through the back that we just went through.
Could you scoot it over to the right a little?
Oh, yeah. So sorry, it's the way that I have to have it here. I can barely see my screen. I appreciate you telling me. So I put it through the first way. I'm holding down the tail in the middle so that it doesn't slip out.
Does it matter how long the tail is?
Not at all, just long enough that you'll be able to like hand tie a knot, but you will be able to kind of slip it around. There's so much extra thread that if it isn't long enough, you'll be able to adjust it at the end. I've even had them slip on me and you can just redo it. It's pretty low stress, especially if you are punching the holes with your needle. Sometimes it even helps to go through a second time because your holes will be more like firm. I don't know if that makes sense. They'll be more solidified, but you won't be hitting as much resistance from the paper. So pull that all the way through so that on the outside fold, it looks like this. On the inside, it looks like this. And then we're gonna go back through that hole that we were holding the tail to the side of. This one is one of the more tricky stitches. So make sure, you know, you line your pages up, take your time. There's no rush. Go back through there. I hope you can see okay what I'm doing. And pull. And then on both sides, you have basically the same stitch at this point. I've got one long stitch on the inside and the outside, and you should have a tail on one side and the open string on the other. Continue to hold down the tail, although you'll notice it's kind of pinned by itself now, but continue holding it out of the way just so it doesn't cause you trouble. And then once you're at this stage, are you ready to move forward? Am I moving too fast?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, great. So we'll go down to this bottom stitch as well, loop through. And this is important. This is why it's important to hold the tail. A lot of thread, even though it seems like it's one piece, is multiple pieces. And multiple times I have like held this so tight and then I put my needle through a single piece of thread and it causes a big knot. So at this stage, the reason you're holding the tail is actually to hold it out of the way. Push your needle up through that bottom hole, pull it all the way. And then your tail and your thread are both going to be on the same side. And you'll take your threaded needle and not through the hole itself, but just through this.
Uh-oh. Well. Stand by. Technical difficulty. I'm gonna read it wrong. Oops.
All right. Sorry, you dropped off for a second. I'm on this backup camera, which also has a better camera. So maybe it'll be a pleasant surprise. My phone started overheating. So I hopefully we won't deal with this again. I turned another fan on, although it might be a little louder in here. Hopefully it will at least be, hopefully you can at least see me. Okay, so I didn't move forward. We are at the stage that we were at last. I apologize. Tail is hanging here. Needle and thread we've got here. And then while you're holding that tail out of the way, you'll take your threaded needle and pull it back through that stitch that we've made. It's a little messy, but it's fine. And then both of your threads are next to each other. At this point, I definitely always try to get like a hard, flat surface. If you have a friend with another pair of hands or like a pencil you can put in between it. We all know this trick to tie a tight knot. Again, I have like terrible dexterity, so knot tying is not one of my strong suits. I'm tied around this awl. It's ironic that I struggle with dexterity and then I work with like the smallest medium possible. I know. Okay. This is me just struggling with the knot. You've probably already superseded this step. Okay.
I messed up and now I'm just winging it.
Oh no. Oh,
I poked too many holes.
Oh,
and-
okay.
Yeah, so now
Well,
I'm
you
just kind of
can-
freehanding it.
You can definitely continue a saddle stitch and do more. You can, if you have an odd number of stitches, you can continue this pattern. And yeah, winging it works fine. Basically, you just want your pages to be in place. Like a little book. And there are easier methods we will move on to. So, and again, if sewing is not your forte and you prefer a staple, you do 1 or 2 staples. Almost kind of want to cut a separate one and show how to do that, but I feel like I'll humble myself because that's where I really struggle. I never get symmetrical staples. So when you're at this stage, if you want, you can do a little trim on the pages. My page edges are definitely not even, so I'm going to do that. Just a little tiny snippy snip. I don't really care for perfection. Set my needle aside so I don't lose it. All right, so with this one, we're essentially done. I will show how to add covers to both methods, but at this point, if it's not too distracting, I'm going to move on to the other method because I just want to make sure that I get both of them in the time, and then we can move on to customizing, decorating, and if we have time, I can even do a demonstration on how I made this one that has the double length fold out pages. But I just want to make sure we get the basics down. So we're going to go back to this other half of the quarter of the page we cut out. Should look just like this. And I know we're moving from one task to another, so let me know when you're caught up.
Yeah, I'm just tying my knot on my other one.
No problem. There's a lot coming at you. We had a technological difficulty and I'm switching it up right in the middle of it. So take your time. I'm gonna have some water. It's like one of the warmest days that we've had since I moved to this new state.
Where are you at?
Moved to New Mexico.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I really like it. From Southern California. We were in San Diego before.
Okay. Yeah, I live in Texas.
Ooh, the humidity. Yeah, we're glad to
Mexico
be
is
away from
nice
humidity.
compared to here.
New Mexico is nice.
Like it's cool, like in the evenings.
Yeah, it's like Arizona. It's so hot during the day sometimes, you know, during the hot seasons, but then the evenings always cool off and it's dry. So even like 95 degrees here feels so different than it does in San Diego. Oh my goodness, I cannot stress that enough. So we're grateful to be here, but the phones are struggling a little bit with the heat. Okay, so this is what we're working with. It can be a little complicated, so I'm just gonna leave this here as like an example. We're essentially ignoring the cut to begin with, and we're gonna just do the same folding that we did for the last one. So, right. Yeah, it doesn't actually particularly matter. I think on this one, I started with the middle fold. So we can start with the horizontal fold for symmetry's sake. I say for symmetry's sake, but this rectangle is not cut symmetrically. So, oops. There we go. One fold. fold it back to open. And then again, like last time, I'm gonna do those two kind of cabinet folds where we fold the two outside edges toward the middle. Still a little bit on that one. I should probably be doing this with my finger braces, but it encumbers me and I thought it might mess up the view a little bit. So don't mind me if I'm a bit slow as well. So that's what our folds look like. Lay it out like this. And at this stage, you can use scissors for this. I do find it's easier to use a box cutter or some kind of blade. And I'm going to trigger warning because I'm going to open a blade on the camera, just a box cutter. I find it easiest to cut a clean line through the middle like this with a box cutter or an X-Acto knife, some sort of craft knife. But if you don't have access to that, or if that doesn't work for you, you can definitely use scissors. For ease, because that's what I listed in the supplies, I think I will just show it with scissors, but then you'll have the comparison. This one was cut with a box cutter. This one was not. If you don't have a box cutter, you can make like a small kind of indentation in like this with your scissors, just the tiniest little nick, the opposite way that you're going to be cutting, so that you can fit your scissors in. These are big craft scissors, so they're not the best. But try to just make like little nicks down the middle. And you're cutting, see, it gets a little messy.
Can't you just cut it like this?
Horizontally, like this?
If you fold it, yeah.
Yeah, you can. You can cut
Or
a
like
piece
the other way.
out. Oh, like which way?
Like fold it like hamburger style. And then cut.
Oh my
that
God. Yeah, my brain is, you can tell I have brain fog. Look, I'm learning things. Thank you. Yeah. So there you go. He works smarter, not harder. Fold it hamburger style, cut it in half. Or you can just, you know, butcher a corner like that. But I think that's definitely smarter. Wow, you just simplified my life so much. It's so silly how like our little silly monkey brains work with tools until we're told a much easier way. Thank you. Okay, so we end up with a piece that hopefully looks less mangled than this. And on this page, I have written out what the pages will be. If you were to like draw it before you folded it, which if you're going to add a cover, you would want to. Then oh, I lost my train of thought, sorry. So I'll just show you what I'm talking about. It folds like this. A lot of people have seen this already, but it folds sort of, you've got your cut here, fold it in half, and then sort of open them up together. Those two become the pages. And then you've got a back cover, a cover, page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, it's all just on the same side of one page. So if you wanted to add a cover like these and glue down your pages, so that what I like to do when I do this method, a lot of like, you know, DIY zines that I've seen, they don't bother to glue these shut. You just recognize that these are the individual pages and that's fine. What I like to do so that they move more cohesively as a page is glue all these top pieces together so that the pages move as one page. But if you decide to do that, you probably would want to color your image first, get your image all ready, and then glue those pages together and then put a cover on. You can add a cover first and then color it in individually. That would be like this one here. I haven't colored it in yet, but I added a cover. It's just got these pages. As you can see, they moved together because I glued them down. We moved just together as one page. It's very simple, but like an inner cover, first page, second, third, fourth, inner cover. And then if you want to decorate the outside or not. You don't have to do this cover. Some people like to just hand draw on the paper, and that looks more like kind of the traditional DIY zines. The reason I started adding these covers is because I plan on making a miniature bookshelf and lining them up this way. They look slightly more like books or magazines or book spines. But you don't have to be that detail oriented and add a cover if you don't feel like it. Do you have any questions? Was this folding complicated? Should I walk through that again? I think a lot of people are pretty familiar, and there's a million tutorials on the internet with this single page fold style, but I also don't want to move ahead if I rushed.
I got it.
Okay. So where are we at in terms of time? Been about an hour. So great. So I think I can walk through a few options for customizing it, if that sounds good. And we can like add some colors. I can show some of the methods that I have used. Again, like most of these that I've made, I did retroactively color. So that is kind of, I like to use them almost like journals or little tiny stories to fill in. But everybody's process is different. So I don't know if I have anything. I can find something over here. Pretty set aside for like a cover. Let's see. I got this like random printed image. It's a copy of a Nat Geo photo. We've got, I think I want to work back with this one. At this point, you can choose to add a cover to either. I just think I like having more pages to work with. So I prefer the sewn method. If you would rather work on the folded one, it doesn't actually make a difference. But basically, you'll take your zine and open it on so that the middle page, and just draw a little X over whatever, or a little square over whatever you want. I think I'm going to take some, maybe like some trees, and you'll want to leave a little area around it. So. Almost like if you're familiar with sewing, you want to leave kind of like a seam allowance. So it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical because you will clean it up with scissors. But I like to draw a guideline. It just helps me. There we go. Something like that. It's probably about a ½ inch on all sides. And then I will cut out, I feel like because it's a black and white image, it might be kind of hard to see my line, but I'm gonna cut out that little rectangle. Side for another craft. And to make your page edges a little more symmetrical, I fold that bigger image for the cover in half. This makes it easier to line up your pages if you have a fold line to match with the book. And again, another advantage to this, if you are choosing to bind your sewn one, is that it reinforces the pages and the binding again as well. So at this point, you can use your glue of choice. I'm just gonna use a glue stick for this. I do think it is easier. It doesn't leave any page wrinkling or anything, but if you want something really durable, again, that's gonna be handled a lot. You might prefer something like this because with time, these do erode. So keep in mind that these are for temporary crafting, but just cover basically the whole cover here. That glue stick or glue, whatever works for you. And we'll fold our zine back in half, just like it would be when you're reading it, and try to take the seam of the zine and match it up about like we drew it with about 1/2 inch on either side along that fold line we just made. And again, because you have some room on the edges, if it's not perfectly symmetrical, it doesn't really matter. Be too fussed with it. And then press it down. I usually do, sorry, the camera's shaking a little bit. Unfortunately, you're mounted to the table, trying not to shake too much. But just press it all down into that glue. And again, in terms of working smarter, not harder, if you were a little bit more clever, maybe you would have trimmed these corners first, but because I know my dexterity is limited and I know I struggle to line things up, I always wait for this step afterwards, but then you have sticky paper. So you can trim your corners before or after. I will trim off at a, I don't know what angle that is. 180-degree angle, I guess. Huh? 45? Yeah. A 45-degree angle, a triangle, you cut the little corner off there, and do that at all 4 of them. And if your glue, like my glue is already not sticky anymore on the edges, that's fine, we'll redo it. Trim the little corners. For anybody familiar with bookbinding, you're probably familiar with this. It's similar, but kind of a shortcut. And as well as that, you'll reinforce your fold, try not to stick it together if they are still sticky. And on that fold line, I'm going to draw so that you can see in case you're not familiar. I'm going to cut out another little triangle here on the top and the bottom, like so. Hope you can see that okay. All right, like that. And like that. All right, and then this is what it should look like so far. You can see that the sewn binding we did is totally covered. If that's what you're binding, I guess. And then we will take our pages. If you have like a paper clip or something to keep them out of the way, you can clip them up while you work with glue. I don't have anything like that with me right now. So I'm just gonna hold them out of my way and try to be careful. Then one by one, it doesn't really matter where you start. You'll just glue these little tabs down to that inside cover. If you cared more than I do, you probably would want to cut off your draw lines. And the reason that you cut out these triangles is just so that your edges don't overlap. If you have corners that are really bulky on a little tiny book like this, it'll end up kind of permanently not staying closed. So at any turn possible, you want to make sure that you're making everything as flat as possible. Once you get these glued down, I'm not focusing on perfection here. Oh my gosh, sorry. If you are a more detailed oriented person, you can totally take your time on this step and I can wait for you if you are. I'm just focusing on getting the job done. once I finish gluing them all down, I will again go over it with whether it's your ruler or the edge of a glue stick, whatever flat edge you have to press your seams, and press all these covers down again. See, this edge worked a lot better. Wow, how nice those edges matched up. This one was not so lucky. So go. Last one. All right, and then again, I'm gonna take that, close that, and give it a good like smush so everything lays nice and flat. You don't want to tear the paper, so don't be too rough with it, but just helping everything stay nice and flat. And that is basically how I add covers. Some of my favorite mediums to use are either photocopies of or actual vintage magazines. I prefer the vintage ones because they have matte pages, and I find glossy pages harder to write on, stiffer to work with. In the instructions list, I mentioned that it's not good to work with cardstock for your covers. You can if you prefer to, but it will make all of your folds bulkier. And you can see often that there's a little small misalignment unless you're absolute perfectionist at folding. And that gap you'll notice more if you use a heavy weight of cardstock on the outside, but not on the inside. This one here that has the cellophane cover, I actually used the incredibly thin plastic that comes in mailing envelopes. So I like upcycled the window out of an envelope from some junk mail that I didn't need. And I would highly recommend setting aside cool trash like that if you are interested in projects like this. Stuff that's meant to go through the mail and meant to be handled a bunch of times is already in existence, already really durable, and already, you know, manufactured to be at the intersection of as thin and as durable as possible. So they work great for covers like this. But as you can see, like no matter what I do, this one kind of doesn't stay closed, it pops open, whereas a lot of the other ones, the paper ones, they lay more flat, they look a little bit more neatly finished. Because this one has a thick cover, it just, yeah, pops open. So really it's about a matter of preference. Did you have any specific questions about any of what I've done before I just keep bantering on about ways to customize this?
I don't think so.
Okay, didn't mean to put you on the spot. Sorry. I just want to make sure I'm not like steamrolling over in case you had any questions. So that being said, then what I will show is the difference in how you would cut pages if you wanted to add in fold up pages like this, because it is a little bit different. So it's also going to take a tiny bit of on the fly brain work from me. So hang on. I'm going to go back to this like original piece of paper that we had. And I'm not going to bind a full book, but I am going to cut out the pages as if I were. And for this one, right, let's see. Right, we still cut it in half. Talk myself through it too. I made that one like 3 months ago, pre cross-country move. Brain fog has set in. Same folds as before, both times. So we'll start on this one, line up our middle folds. And then again, those two folds, which we will fold toward the center line. Alrighty. And so on this one, instead of cutting into the 4 quadrants that we did before to make the page break up, we are going to cut into 3. So just cut down this middle and leave this whole first half separate and set that aside. Cut that in half. Take this, set that aside. And we'll take this. We're going to go back to that main page we were cutting from and cut out just one of the small rectangles instead of the full 1/8 of a page, 1/16 of a page. Cut just one more of those out. Trim that like a kind of ugly edge there. Great. And then again with this one, we will do the same. Fold into quarters. Just getting another set of pages, because when you add out that double fold, you lose, you know, a set of pages. If you want less pages and you just want a small one, you can work with, this would be like, I guess 4 pages, and then the fold out. But I really like to have the same number. I like how it looks when it's a little bit fuller. Totally your discretion at this point. I mean, you can make them a little bit bigger if you are someone who works with bookbinding and you know bookbinding terms. You can essentially use this method to make small signatures, which are like small books that you put together to make a book, if that makes sense. You can also use this for actual traditional tiny bookbinding methods if you want. It's just very time consuming, especially the more pages you add, the more particular you have to be about making sure your pages are all cut evenly. So with this one, I am going to, I guess that's hamburger fold, cut it on that short line. And we'll go back to those 2 accordions that we have. Take one of them and cut that in half as well, not the other. That's up to you. Personally, I still am left with 1 extra page. I think it might make it a little too bulky if I put all of them. So I'm going to set one little guy aside. Take this. You can choose to add it if you want. It's your prerogative. Take this folded one, sandwich that in the middle. Take this other page. It's up to you. If you like the fold out page being the center fold, then you could arrange it that way so that this is the very center of the zine or the book. If you want it to be the very first page that you see and add some extra information about you or about the topic at hand, you can do that. I like to sandwich it in the middle personally. And then you would go about binding and adding a cover as usual. Just fold those little dudes in like that. And then bind as we did before. However, I will say, if you choose to do this folding method and you're moving forward with binding, I folded it in so you would know what it looks like once it's all done. But while you're actually binding, you definitely want to work with your pages unfolded so that you don't take a needle through this and then end up accidentally sewing that bifold shut. I did that once and I wasted probably like 45 minutes of my time and I was so frustrated. You know, it's all temporary art. You don't have to get too deep about it, but smarter, not harder. And yeah, that's one of my favorite tactics to add. I'm not exactly sure what else I can elaborate on. In terms of actually coloring them in, if you do want to do them like I've done, this one is a, like I mentioned, full color zine. You definitely have to use pens that are, intended for journaling or that don't bleed through. These are super fine tip microns, so they're an alcohol-based ink. Alcohol inks do bleed through the page, but these are meant for journaling, so they really don't. And then I only used colored pencil and gel pen. Even water-based markers that are meant for journaling on this thinner paper usually will show through with time to the other side. So you do have to be particular about what you use. If you use like graphite and charcoal, I think that would probably also work, but for sensory reasons, I just prefer kind of waxy colored pencils and markers. So that's what works for me. And then, yeah, if you had any other specific questions, I'd be happy to go ahead. And otherwise, I'm not really sure what else to add. We can sit and like do some coloring if you feel like it. But if you feel like you have gained what you need from it, we're pretty close to wrap up anyway. I mean, yeah, got like 40 minutes left of time booked. Yeah. Wanted to do like some coloring. I'd love to see what you ended up with, but no pressure.
I'm just binding the fold out one.
Oh, cool. I love that. I put those in my little journals a lot. A lot of these tactics I actually learned for journaling because I make like a bigger, much bigger version of all of this. Like I said, I apply these tactics to projects of all size, and this is how I make my journals. When I was talking about combining them into signatures, this is an example of that. It's terribly done because it was the first book I ever made, but I made little sections, kind of like I walked you through just now, and then I put a string through those, each section, and bound it around a cover. It's not the most stable thing, but I love it. And doing that kind of like journaling is what got me into this. Like in my journals, I put a lot of pop outs and stuff like this. And it just turned into micro zine making. I just like tiny things. And I love turning trash into treasure too. I really like upcycling things that have been thrown away. When I say vintage magazines, I mostly mean like I acquire them from bookstores that are throwing them away when they're tattered and they're missing a cover or whatever, if they're reduced price. I love to craft with stuff like that, repurpose it so it doesn't go to a landfill.
Yeah.
Did you end up adding a cover to one of them?
No, I didn't have anything interesting to
No problem.
make a cover out of. So I just watched you.
No, that's fine. The technique is pretty simple. I mean, it's definitely not an original concept. So you don't have to do a walkthrough. I'm surprised I had something on hand. All of my like ephemera is still boxed up, but I just had this random piece of paper in my sketchbook. That's cool. Well, awesome. And also you can, if you do decide to do bigger ones, you can use bigger and sturdier covers. This is a paint chip. This is a cereal box with a t-shirt over it that I painted on. You can use all sorts of things for covers if you do decide to work bigger, but you can see even with like these ones, because I've done a smaller weight paper and it's kind of chunky filled, and then a bigger cover that's just bound at the one point. It's thick and it doesn't really stay closed. I kind of like that. I like when my art looks like it's like spilling over the page and it looks like inviting, like come see what's inside of this. But some people do prefer a much more neat project where it stays, firmly closed. So that's really just down to like page selection and like the weight of the paper that you use.
Yeah, how do you make them bigger? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, basically just the same exact method, but instead of like folding it and making tiny pages, you would just I can even show you. Stop folding and making it smaller and then end up using multiple pages. I use also like a lot of alternative papers and stuff, especially if I'm doing that kind of like sewn and bind method. You can use, these are like tea dyed paper doilies from the dollar store. You can use all kinds of stuff to add like texture into your journals. But with that, I would use like for one this size. I do the same thing basically. I just fold, if I have only like scraps of paper, you know, then instead of folding them down, I'll just cut them down, stack them together. And I have a little paper cutter. It's best if you have a like choppy paper cutter, but most people don't have the means for that. So you can use scissors or you can use a little sliding one like I have. I just find that they kind of leave dull edges in the papers. But on this one, yeah, you would do that, basically that quarter fold and then the cabinet fold in. Do that same thing again, except instead of continuing to fold and make smaller and smaller and smaller pages, at this point, you would cut it into like 4 that look like this. And then you can cut that. It's so messy, but point taken, I think. You can just stack these like this. Do the same thing. And you can add, again, like papers of any texture. You can take this, fold that in half, and, you know, cut that in half, and then pop those in as pages in between. You can use, and that's what I've done in here. Like, I love to use doilies actually, because I think they just break up pages, and I draw on them sometimes I don't. But I really like, they like little nice little veils for the image on the next page. It's just nice, nice to add some texture. And I have, in this one, I've got like graph paper, I've got old sketchbook paper, I've got sticky notes, like literally anything that you have lying around. You can just cut to approximately the same size page, bind it together, and it's a journal. Like, I haven't bought a sketchbook in years. I'm still using sketchbooks that I bought in like 2016 because you get so much paper sent to you, and like it's just around all the time. And especially if you're a little like magpie like me, you collect pretty things and don't know what to do with them. So I love just like finding it all together in a book and giving it some purpose. Otherwise, I will just end up with, I'll be one of those hoarder people who just has stacks of paper that never turn into anything. So I'm always looking for hobbies to like creatively use trash.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I definitely like, I could just keep rambling about journaling and whatever forever, get into junk journaling. That is kind of a separate whole other can of worms. But yeah, these little microzines are so much fun. I really hope like if anybody continues to make them, if you make them, right, or if anybody watching this after the fact does, please like tag me on my social media. Do you know, is the Discord gonna stay up after the fest? So yeah, throw it in the Discord if you're in that. I want this, I'm gonna post this in the Discord because I know people who didn't show up asked for it and said that they wanted that. So it's been chaotic, but maybe still will be helpful. And I'm excited to see what people make. I really, especially with these little fold outs and like pop-ups and stuff, I really like seeing how everybody's creativity stretches the limit of like what's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me and engaging with me. I was really fun. Sorry, it was just us. Like, I feel it bad that I put the spotlight on you so much, but I'm grateful that you were here.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It was fun.
Yeah, no problem. Well, let me know if you color in or do anything with your Chinese zines, or if you make any other ones in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I think I'm gonna probably, it's a little bit early, but I feel like we covered everything. Otherwise, I'm just gonna ramble about stuff that's not relevant.
Cool. Yeah. And I will figure out how to send the recording.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time. I don't know what that, I'm so Zoom illiterate. So
I've never done this before. So, but
I fully believe in you. If it takes time and you need to ask OB or ask someone who maybe does have experience, no worries. But I appreciate you recording it. The app yelled at me, "You are recording." So
yeah.
I know something happened.
Yeah, it is recording.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what people make when they're all finished. Hope you enjoyed the 2 binding methods. And because you were here firsthand, if you found what I was doing with the binding too confusing, I can also try to find a YouTube tutorial or take photos of saddle stitching, because it's one of those, it's like crochet or something, where like the first time you do it, it's like, what is this mumbo jumbo rocket science? And then once it's secondhand, it's really simple. So if I need to do a more clear-cut walkthrough, I'm happy to.
Cool. I also was wondering what your like, if you have Venmo or something, you could say that, and then people.
Oh yeah, I did put them on my page, but I have Venmo and Cash App. They are both Teddy Bear Surprise. I also have PayPal, but it discloses my dead name to people. So that's, if you want it, you can DM me, and I really appreciate people wanting to support me, but I try not to put my dead name on on blast on social media.
Yeah, that's how my PayPal is too.
It's so annoying.
Even like how to get around it.
My URL has my name, my chosen name, but the minute that you go, it's like, confirm that you want to send money to so and so, and I'm just like, there's nothing I can do. Yeah. So but yeah, they're both Teddy Bear Surprise, all one word, spelled exactly like it sounds, with no punctuation or anything like that. And that is also on the bottom of my page on the Zine Fest website. Cool. Thank you so much, Ray. I appreciate it. Thanks for reminding me to plug. I'm like really bad at self promo.
Thanks for hosting this workshop.
Yeah, no problem. It was really fun. I get a lot of like nerves and stuff about it, but I'm glad I gave it a shot. I hope people learned something.
Yeah, it was very informative.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I'll probably see you in the Discord what you made or whatever. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.